Senator Vivola around.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, yes.
with regard to Senate Bill 1244, my bill, we've got some witnesses that need to move along. Is it possible I could present it now?
Sure.
Oh, thank you.
What bill is it?
Senate Bill 1244.
1244, Senate Bill 1244. And if Senator Vivola shows up, let me know. Okay. 1244, Senate Bill 1244. We're making progress. Civil commitment of sexually violent predators.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This bill seeks to abolish civil commitment. I will say this at the very beginning. There is no code section that I find more offensive and more inconsistent with due process and fairness than this civil commitment. This bill would repeal Virginia Code Section 37.2900 through 37.2921, which provides and allows for the Commonwealth to civilly commit somebody under the Sexually Violent Predator Act. Now, let me tell you exactly what I'm talking about. I'm talking about that individual who has been convicted of a sexually violent act, tried by a jury, sentenced, go through the sentencing proceeding, and is sentenced to 30 years in jail. That person finishes his 30 years in jail, has had no incidents in jail, and then he has a civil commitment hearing. And I'm going to discuss that process in just a moment, and then is essentially reincarcerated at the Virginia Center for Behavioral Rehabilitation. Let me kind of set out a little background so folks know. It was 22 years ago that the Virginia General Assembly created a process for committing inpatient treatment those individuals who had committed a sexually violent act. And the process is administered by the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Services, DBHDS, and it's driven by a psychological evaluation. In front of you, it was just passed out, was a static 99R tally sheet. I want you to look at that for a moment, and I want you to consider this situation. Somebody has been convicted, and a judge had a sentencing hearing, and at that sentencing hearing, that judge considered everything, including past convictions, and sentenced that person to a significant penitentiary sentence, Mr. Chairman. And then, within 6 months of him being released, this person then is reevaluated. And the first evaluation is this tally sheet. Now, if you look at it, items 3 through 10, or excuse me, 3 through 10 has already been considered by the judge. Past crimes, violent or nonviolent. There's a new one, number 2, ever lived with a lover. I don't know what that has to do with anything. And then the age upon them being released. So this is what it does. It has this form, and then if you have a 1, 2, or 3 rating, you're considered an average risk to reoffend. 1, 2, or 3. It's easy to get to 4 or 5, which is above average risk. And if that occurs, then the process is, after being screened by DOC, then there's a committee formed. And that committee includes DOC, DBHDS, a psychologist or psychiatrist, state paid, and a representative from the Office of the Attorney General. You know what it doesn't include? Any representative for the defendant. So a person goes through 30 years, is ready to go home, has committed no other offenses, and is recommitted because why? There's a circuit court hearing, and there is probable cause to find that the person is a sexually violent predator. There's been no other criminal acts or even offensive act or even untoward behavior committed in jail. It reminds me quite frankly, of a Tom Cruise movie where you could look into the future and determine that this person may create a crime in the future. So lock them up in another jail. It's just a different facility. I mean, it is one of the most repugnant things I've ever seen. It is akin to the following. If somebody is convicted of a drug offense, and let's say they have had 4 or 5 previous drug offenses, they're a drug addict, and they're getting ready to be released after 10 years, and you have this hearing where they'll probably use drugs again, you continue their incarceration. My favorite example, and some of the older folk in here might remember, do you remember Willie Sutton? He was a bank robber in the 30s and 40s.
They said, Willie, how come you rob banks? He said, that's where the money is.
Exactly. I remember my daddy telling me that. They asked him, why do you keep robbing banks? Because that's where they keep the money. But he would rob a bank, and he'd break out of jail, broke out 7 or 8 times. He'd go rob a bank. And they told him, what happens if you get out again? I'm going to rob another bank. But he didn't rob the bank yet. And this would be like after he finished serving his sentence, just incarcerate him again because he might commit another crime, whether it's drugs, bank robbery, or any other offense.
Senator, as I understand, I remember this went to the Supreme Court on the grounds of lack of due process. Supreme Court said, well, even though the person has served their criminal sentence, you can commit them for rehabilitation purposes only.
Yes.
And so you're saying it's twisted, so it doesn't really work that way.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
The Supreme Court has said that, Senator, that you can recommit them. You know what's interesting, though? We don't do it at the beginning of their sentence where they may have some benefit to sending them to this. It's at the very end. And we are predicting that they may recommit, so we'll lock them up again.
Someone has a question. Yes,
Chairman, Senator Stanley.
Stanley.
Mr. Chairman, ask the patron a question, if I may.
Go ahead.
Senator Morrissey, have you been to that facility? Have you been there?
In Nottoway?
Have you been to the sexually violent, the SVP facility?
Have you, Senator Stanley?
Yes, more than once.
Tell us about it.
It's not pretty. And I can't, without divulging attorney-client privilege matters, there's nobody in there that seems like they should be getting out, in my opinion, in my humble legal opinion. They are very dangerous persons that are already there in civil commitment. And so my question is, I mean, at best, wouldn't you want to see if this is the right thing to do? Because these are people who have been deemed to be SVPs, and they are.
The only way I can answer
And
that is...
And to let them out would be to put children and women and men and our citizens at risk.
Okay, Senator Morrissey, would you like to have
ask the
this?
Senator, how do you look at that person and they've had a stellar career, or that's a poor choice of word, a stellar period of incarceration, and determine that they will do it again, other than one factor: they've done it before. And I would ask the Senator, if somebody had committed 3 murders before, he's locked up for 30 years, and you predict, and it's only probable cause, that he will murder again, just continue the incarceration?
Well, if there's some people here who'd like to speak, let's go
Well,
ahead.
and if I may,
have a
Mr.
few
Chairman, just
people
very
speak,
quickly,
okay?
and I think he brings up a good point, though. But we're talking about a potential mental disorder, that some of these that are so sexually violent that they cannot, it's a compulsion that they cannot control. And that prison may give them a structure that prevents that compulsion from being acted upon. But once that they're in the free society, that compulsion overtakes them.
Okay.
Now, Senator Morrissey, does the AG support this? Has the AG said this is a good bill, the Attorney General's office?
Oh, no, they're one of the folks that lock them up, keep them going. They're one of the people on the committee, along with DOC and the AG and the psychiatrist paid by the state, that says, we predict they will commit the crime again. Mr. Chairman, I know
there are people who would like to speak
Yes, sir.
one way or the other. So who would like to speak in favor of the bill?
Mr. Chairman, can we put a time limit on it?
Yeah, let's put a time limit. Say 2 minutes per person. I don't know how many people there are. How many are there?
Per side or per person?
Per person. Who would like to speak in favor of the bill? I see 2. 3? Okay. 1 minute each person, and there are 3 or 4 people. Go ahead, speak.
John Hilton, please unmute and go ahead. Thank you. Good evening. Thank you for having me speak. I just want to say, as a child victim of sexual trafficking who was brought to this country at the age of 7.5 and started being raped and abused and traumatized by a parent at the age of 9.5, and who suffered significant trauma throughout her childhood and young adulthood that led her to be incarcerated. I must respond to the senator. There are no pretty prisons. No matter who you see in prison, it's always going to be ugly, and you're always going to be jaded against that person. But I'm saying here today that I have forgiven everyone that has caused me harm, everyone that has hurt me as a child and as a young adult. And I say to you that a lot of those people had trauma themselves, and we never, ever give them the opportunity to address it, to work on it. And that's why we see this continuation of abuse and violence
So
and hurt,
you support,
because we don't address it.
you
We
su-
should invest in that instead,
you
not
support,
into prisons.
you support the bill, is that right? Okay.
Yes, I do support.
Okay, who else supports the bill?
Cynthia Brown, please go ahead.
Hi, my name is Cynthia Brown. I worked at VCBR as an RN for approximately a year. Passed medication to prisoners, assessed sick calls. I noted that during my tenure there, they had very poor floor staffing, low levels of nurses. The care and oversight by senior medical staff was lax, to say the least. The abuse of power over prisoners was rampant. There was a lack of respect for the prisoners' needs. And on top of that, they grouped mentally challenged prisoners in a segregated pod, which I found kind of appalling. There was a constant litany of prisoners with no release dates. For a behavioral facility, it was anything but. There were metal sliding doors, pat downs, room tosses, and they also monitored mail and telephones. And
You support
to
the
be
bill?
honest with you, these prisoners, hundreds of them, I felt threatened one time the entire year I was there by one prisoner.
Mr. Chairman,
You threaten, you support the bill? Yeah, Senator Searle. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure how many more people are left in the queue, but I think I have a sense where this bill's going. There's
Okay.
a lot of people waiting to testify about other bills. We got.
Okay, I understand that. All right, next person, you got 1 minute.
Eric Jensen, please go ahead.
Hello, my name is Dr. Bernita Thompson, and I'm an African-American citizen and homeowner in Hampton, Virginia, with an extensive family in Virginia. I also own and operate 2 schools. The SVP laws have negatively impacted my family personally and a large percentage of other Black families in Virginia. The 2010 census showed just under 20% of Virginians were Black, which still holds true today. Yet over 60% of the men labeled with the scarlet letters SVP are Black. They are forced to serve civil time indefinitely, unconstitutionally restrictions in and out of this shadow prison system that they call VCBR,
Okay.
which is masquerading as a treatment facility after they have already completed their criminal time.
Support the bill. Thank you
Please
very
vote.
much. Yeah, thank you very much.
Please vote for SB 1244.
Okay.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Johnny Huff, is that right? Johnny Huff?
Johnny Huff, please unmute before, and then go ahead.
Go ahead.
Johnny Huff, you're still muted. Please unmute in Zoom.
Can you hear me now, sir?
Go ahead.
All right. My name is Mr. Huff, a Sergeant Huff, exact Master Sergeant, retired United States Army. I was unfortunate enough to be in VCBR. I had completed my prison sentence, and I was wrongfully convicted to begin with. That was later adjudicated 20 years after spending time in there. I would agree with the young lady who just spoke that this is a shadow prison. There's no therapy there whatsoever. Anybody that would disagree with that, I'd have to argue with.
Okay.
I defended this country, and I love this country. But I am tired of seeing people put away when there's other ways to treat them. Treatment and not prison. I would support this bill.
Okay, thank you very much. Eric Janice, is that it? One more person. Eric?
Yeah, thank you.
Go ahead.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm a law professor in Minnesota, and I've studied this area for about 25 years, written a book published by Cornell University Press about these so-called sexually violent predator laws. I'll just make a couple of really quick points. Number one, these laws have been held to be constitutional by the US Supreme Court on an assumption that they would be very, very narrowly applied. In practice, they're not. There are few limits on their application. Number two, these laws take a mental health model, expand it, and turn our Constitution on its head. Our revolution was fought to put a limit on the possibility of this sort of government power, exactly this, which is locking people up, not in punishment for a crime, but because we're afraid they might do something in the future. In my opinion, it's a very dangerous concept, and it is contrary to our American Constitution.
Thank you very much. We appreciate. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman.
All right, well, just a second, sir. Go ahead, Mr. Janice. You want to wrap it up in another 10 seconds? Mr. Janice, I think I cut you off. All right, okay. Now, I think that's everybody in favor of the bill. Anybody want to?
Mr. Chair, there are a lot more people in favor of the bill.
Oh, okay. State your name. Just a minute, Dick. I'm running this thing. All right, state your name and say in 15 seconds why you support the bill.
Sean Juanita, please go ahead.
Sean Juanita, Legislative Liaison with the Humanization Project. We support this bill. If the court believes that they're a danger, then they should be sentenced to a longer sentence. If it's locking somebody up and continuing to lock them up for something that they might do in the future. So we support this bill wholeheartedly. Thank you.
Okay, next.
Chuck Slimp, please go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this is Chuck Slimp. I'm the Commonwealth Attorney in Wise County.
Chuck Slimp, Wise County Commonwealth Attorney. Go ahead.
My bad. It was a misclick. He'll be back in the room in just a second.
Okay, go ahead.
He should be back now. Sorry about that,
Mr.
Chuck.
Chairman, can you hear me now, sir?
Go ahead.
Mr.
Yeah,
Chairman?
we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chairman, I'm Chuck Slimp. I'm the Commonwealth's Attorney in Wise County, Virginia. I'm speaking on the bill on behalf of VACA, who opposes the legislation. But I also have a unique perspective on this because before I was elected Commonwealth's Attorney, I was in private practice and was a defense counsel in a case appointed to represent someone who was accused of and later committed by a jury to be a sexually violent predator. And so I'll say a couple things from my perspective very briefly, and I respect the committee's time. The first I would say is there is due process, preliminary hearing, civil discovery, appointment of counsel, experts appointed to both sides, a jury trial, and appeals to the Supreme Court. I've been to the facility. I've interviewed clients. They have annual review hearings in front of a court. There's treatment going on. Ultimately, and the thing I want to leave you with, members, is the practical aspect of repealing this thing outright. As of December 31st, my calculation, there are 405 sexually violent predators at VCBR. They're committed there. First of all, they have a predicate of a sexually violent offense, but that's not the standard, not just a sexually violent offense. They have a mental disorder that makes it likely for them to reoffend. And that's, doctors have evaluated that. So we have people who are sick, not just criminals, but people who are sick, and they need treatment. And if this bill passes, those predators who are sick will be released. Half of those individuals would have no probation obligation. And if it's repealed entirely, those who are already on conditional release and there's 274, 75 of those individuals as of December 31st. Those individuals, if it's repealed, will have no probation, no GPS tracking, no longer subject to sexually violent predator treatment. And the last thing I'll say about that, for individuals who need sex offender treatment, the overall concern about raising public safety is this. These individuals, most insurance plans do not cover sex offender treatment. And so financial assistance for people who are going to be thrown out with no home, with no tracking, with nowhere to go, individuals who are sick and who have a propensity to reoffend. On a personal matter, I respect and understand what Senator Morrissey is trying to do. I thank you, sir, for trying to reform this. But as a practical public safety matter, we need to be concerned. It's just not prudent to throw these folks out and get rid of this entire model. So I respectfully ask the measure to be defeated. Thank you.
Are the rest of these people against the bill? All right, go ahead. Who's against the bill? Speak.
Martin Andrews, please unmute and go ahead.
Give you 30 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee, for affording me the opportunity to speak about this. My name is Martin Andrews, and I'm a resident of Prince William County. Some of you might remember me as being the instrumental in the creation of the Civil Commitment of Sexually Violent Predators program that we were discussing today. In 2003, the General Assembly, Governor Warner, Attorney General Kilgore, with the affirmation of the U.S. and the Virginia Supreme Courts, came together with a single, unanimous voice to create the Civil Commitment of Sexually Violent Predators program that's now under assault by Senate Bill 1244. Many of you, including you, Mr. Chairman, were personally lobbied by me on behalf of this bill and cast affirmative votes in favor of its creation. At the time, this body recognized the real threat posed by sexually violent predators who are released from custody to once again freely prey on our citizenry and mostly our children. Senator Morrissey has likened this program to punishing sexual predators for crimes they have yet to commit. And I believe that it is a gross mischaracterization of the program from both a legal and purpose perspective. The person he described, the single offender in for 30 years, first of all, that doesn't happen. And number two, that person will not be eligible for commitment under the program. So he is mischaracterizing what it takes to be civilly committed. From a legal perspective, the SVP program is a civil program, not criminal. Prior to their release from prison, the record of every person convicted of sex offenses is examined to determine.
Mr. Chairman, point of
based
order.
upon
He's exceeded his time by three times now.
Yeah, okay. I'm running the show. Okay. All right. And next person who say what your name is and what position you have on the bill. For or against.
Sophia Orlando, please unmute.
Thank you so much, Chair, for having me here today. I am a student at American University. I am 21 years old, and I am a victim of sexual violence and harassment. I appreciate what Mr. Andrews is saying here. I understand where he's coming from. I know he's asking you to think about your children. In many cases, the word "I am" still a child considered by the state. I want to speak to you because I'm also a young woman and passionate about justice and advocating for change. I'm here to challenge you that justice isn't just for you, for me, for Mr. Martin. We don't get to pick and choose who deserves dignity or equality. There aren't exceptions to human rights. We shouldn't lock up people for what they might do in the future or who they could potentially be. That is not how our justice system works. When someone has completed their prison sentence, when they have repaid their debt to society, they deserve to go home. What Virginia is doing to these hundreds of men and their families, indefinitely warehousing them in a carceral setting after the completion of their prison sentences, that is not justice.
So you support
Senate Bill 1244 would end Virginia's failed experiment in this case.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, got one more person, right?
Megan Yobos, please go ahead.
Go ahead.
Hello, my name is Megan Ebos. I'm the founder of People for the Enforcement of Rape Laws, an organization founded by and for people who have experienced sexual violence. When I was 16 years old, I was raped by a stranger who had broken into my home. While you might expect someone in my position to support harsher punishment, however, I speak in support of Senate Bill 1244, which would repeal a law that allows the state to commit people convicted of certain sexual crimes to psychiatric facilities after they've completed their sentences. We know that harsher punishment does not make us safer. Fewer than half the states have these laws on the book, yet published research shows that they have no impact on the rates of sexual violence. We know that they do not make us safer, but they do create harm through subjecting individuals to further government control after they've paid their debts to society. Civil commitment for those who have already served their sentences should not be justified in the name of people like myself who have experienced sexual violence. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, a couple of, just say your name and whether you're for it. Give you 15 seconds, each one. Go ahead.
Jerry Fitz, please go ahead.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Jerry Fitz, I'm with the Virginia Department of Corrections, and I'm here for, the Department of Correction has no position, just here for any technical questions that may arise.
Okay. Next person.
Rich Wohlert, please go ahead.
Go ahead. Dr. Wohlert.
Dr. Wohlert, please unmute your mic first.
Go ahead. Unmute your mic.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, I'm a clinical psychologist, PhD. I've treated thousands of sex offenders and been involved in hundreds of sexually violent predator cases. My point is that, and I would encourage the committee to consider the fact that SVP commitment laws were passed 30 years ago, but they lack psychiatric acceptance and scientific validation still at this date. The official position of the American Psychiatric Association is that SVP laws undermine the legitimacy of the medical model of commitment. There is no such thing as a mental abnormality in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of the American Psychiatric Association, even though the DSM diagnoses are used as proxies for mental abnormalities. And the DSM diagnostic manual does not discuss, has never discussed the concept of a mental abnormality. And this is because the Psychiatric Association believes the concept is largely invalid. From a scientific standpoint, the reliability of the diagnoses are inferior, they're negligible. The definitions of the main terms, mental abnormality, volitional emotional impairment, menace to others, are too vague to be used scientifically. And the recidivism rates for SVPs are very low, and particularly for Virginia. I've got data that indicate that the recidivism rates for those who have been released, convicted as SVPs, but then released to the community is on the order of 2%.
Yeah, thank you very much. I wish we had a lot more time, but we don't. Is there anybody else? Is anybody else that has? How many people are out there on this bill that want to speak? Do we know?
Looks like at least 4 more.
4 more. All right, can you just state your name and whether you're for or against it very quickly?
Garnett, please go ahead.
My name is Garnet Robbins Boffman. I'm Just Future Project, and the 2 lawyers that spoke, Martin and the other one, are completely, utterly wrong.
Okay.
There's a 15-year-old who was.
Point of
15.
order.
He
She's
had
not
one
stating her
charge.
position, Mr. Chairman.
State
He
your
is
position.
one.
Give your name and
Excuse
state
me.
your position. What are you for or against
My
it?
position is you all are misrepresenting information and completely inaccurate information.
position
and you're
you're-
stating it as fast.
What is
I am
your
absolutely-
position? You
I am for SB
Okay.
1244.
Okay, thank
and I
you.
want you all to.
Okay, next.
Lynetta Thompson.
You state your name and whether you're for it or not, against it, that's all. State your name and whether you're for it or against it. State your name, please, and are you for or against the bill?
Lynetta
Thompson. Yeah, I am for the bill,
Okay.
but I will have to differ with one of the senators that said that people cannot fall through the system. I am the past president of the Richmond NAACP, and I advocated for a gentleman that did 35 years in prison, made parole, did excellent stuff in the prison that the prison is still using today. Upon his parole, 6 months, as was said, he got a letter for civil commitment. His crime was committed when he was 15 years old. He never made it to the street. So he was civil committed, and then he was
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
BCBR. But this bill is very unjust, and there's no due process for the individuals that have done their time.
You support the bill. Thank you very much. Now, nobody else is to speak. Senator Morsi, you've opened up a can of worms. We need about 6 years to study this. We can't do it today. I suggest we go to some study or something.
Mr.
Okay?
Chairman.
Yeah, Senator Morsi.
Servo. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Senate Finance Committee put in a budget amendment last year which produced a study which recommended that we start treating these people at the beginning of their incarceration in prison. They recommended that we do another $1 million to do that in the coming year. I think we need to sort of continue that process, see how it goes. In the meantime, I think this bill ought to go to the Crime Commission where they can look at it in conjunction with the information coming back from that study that's going on. So I moved to PBI the bill with a letter from you, Mr. Chairman, asking the Crime Commission to look at this.
Is there a second? Any discussion? The motion is to PBI the bill with a letter from the chairman to the Crime Commission to study the bill. All in favor of the motion say aye, or vote aye. I wish we had 10 hours to study this.
I know.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. All right, thank you. Now, do we have another bill that's not this long?
Thank you for the time, allowing people pro and con to speak.
Okay.
And I've got 3, and I have witnesses.
Senator Favola, I promised her.